Hello friends, welcome to my channel. Today we are going to start a new topic of English literature, and that is some important years with social, political and literary events. In this we are starting with Chaucer to Shakespeare. In 1337 there was a conflict between France and England, and there was 100-year war begins. In 1346, Battle of Crecy. 1348, first outbreak of plague in England and Black Death happens. In 1377, there was a reformation by Wycliffe. 1380, Lollard movement by Wycliffe. 1381, there was Peasants' Revolt. Wat Tyler Rebellion also happened at that time. In 1453, there was Henry VI went insane and it seemed that Duke of York would be chosen, but Queen gave birth to a son. So battle for the crown was found. In 1455, there was the first battle in the Wars of Roses begins. In 1476, Sexton started printing press. In 1485, Battle of Bosworth, victory of Henry VII over Richard III. In 1521, there was the Pope gives Henry VII the title Defender of the Faith. In 1564, there was the birth of Shakespeare, and this is a huge. In 1582, there was a Shakespeare marriage Anne Hathaway. In 1588, there was Spanish Armada defeated. In 1592, Plaque closes theatre for 2 years. In 1599, first Globe Theatre opened. In 1600, East India Company founded. In 1611, King James Bible published. In 1613, Globe Theatre burned. In 1614, the Globe rebuilt. In 1616, there was the death of Shakespeare. Now we come to the next topic, and that is from Jacobean period to Restoration period. In 1603, there was a death of Elizabeth, accession of James VI as James I. In 1611, King James Bible published. In 1613, Globe Theatre burned. In 1614, the Globe rebuilt. 1616, death of Shakespeare. In 1621, Donne made Dean of St. Paul's. In 1622, first regular English journal weekly by Archer and Nicholas. In 1625, there was the death of James I and accession of Charles I. In 1641, Puritanism began. In 1642, there was civil war and closing of the theatres. In 1649, there were Charles I executed. In 1653, Oliver Cromwell becomes land protector. In 1658, there was the death of Oliver Cromwell. In 1660, the Restoration begins and the accession of Charles II. Samuel Pepys begins his diary. Theatre reopened. Royal Society of London was found. In 1662, Royal Society's first charter, Church of England, restored. In 1665, the Second Great Plague. In 1666, Great Fire of London. In 1685, James II succeeds Charles II after his death. Monmouth's rebellion took place. In 1688, James II flees. Glorious Revolution. In 1689, there was William and Mary II succeed. In 1694, Mary dies. Now come to the next age, and that is Augustan age from the 18th century literature. In 1701, the Act of Settlement passed. In 1702, William's death and succession of N.A. In 1709, First Copyright Act passed. In 1713, the Treaty of Utrecht took place. In 1714, death of Anne, George I succeeds. In 1715, Jacobite rebellion in favor of James Edward, the Old Pretender. In 1720, South Sea bubble burst. In 1727, George II succeeded after the death of George I. In 1737, Licensing Act in England passed. In 1745, Second Jacobite Rebellion led by Charles Edward the Young Pretender, harshly put down. In 1755, Johnson's Dictionary. In 1756, beginning of 7-Year Wars. In 1760, there was a death of George II and succession of George III. In 1763, there was a Peace of Paris ends 7-Year War. In 1770, there was a suicide of Chatterton. In 1771, first edition of Encyclopedia Britannica. In 1776, American independence. In 1784, invention of steam engine by James Watt. In 1789, the French Revolution comes. In 1792, imprisonment of French royal family. In 1793, the open warfare between France and England. In 1795, the French dictionary established major literary figures and their works. Now come to the next period, and that is Romantic period. So loud. In 1798, lyrical ballads published. The Battle of Nile and Revolt in Ireland and Industrial Revolution. In 1800, Union with Ireland. In 1802, Peace of Amiens. Border begins the Edinburgh Review. In 1803, war with France renewed. 1804, Napoleon becomes emperor. In 1805, Nelson's victory. In 1806, end of Holy Roman Empire. In 1807, abolition of slave trade. 1808, Peninsular War begins. In 1806, Quarterly Review founded. In 1811, Ludite riots. In 1812, French retreat from Moscow. In 1814, Napoleon abdicates and retreats to Elba. Restoration of Louis XVII. In 1815, Battle of Waterloo and Napoleon's defeat. Corn Law passed. In 1817, Habeas Corpus Act suspended. Blackwood's Edinburgh magazine founded. In 1818, Habeas Corpus Act restored. In 1819, Waterloo Massacre. In 1820, death of George and George IV ascends. In 1821, death of Napoleon. In 1824, National Gallery opened and Westminster Review founded. In 1825, financial crises were there and trade unions legalized. In 1827, there was a Battle of Navarino. Scott acknowledges authorship of the Waverley novels. In 1829, Catholic Emancipation Act. In 1830, there was a death of George IV and accession of William IV, agitation for reform. In 1831, a reform bill introduced but failed. In 1832, Reform P passed. So now come to the next period, and that is Victorian period. So let's start with it. In 1833, there is 1833, not 1333. In 1833, Oxford Movement launched. In 1834, Houses of Parliament burned. In 1836, Chartist movement happens. In 1837, William IV died and Victoria ascends the throne. In 1838, People's Charter published. In 1840, new House of Parliament begins. In 1842, second presentation of People's Charter to Parliament. In 1843, Theatre Regulation Bill. In 1846, famine in Ireland. In 1847, 10 Arts Factory Act. In 1848, third presentation of Charter, foundation of Pre-Raphaelite Brotherhood, Second Republic in France and Roman Republic. In 1850, death of Wordsworth. In 1851, there is a Great Exhibition. In 1856, Peace of Paris. In 1857, India's first war of independence. In 1858, peace in India transferred to British Crown. In 1859, On the Origin of Species published. In 1861, American Civil War begins. In 1865, Lincoln assassinated. In 1867, Second Reform Act. In 1875, Agricultural Depression. In 1876, Victoria becomes Authors of India. In 1884, Third Reform Act. In 1885, radio waves discovered. In 1887, Queen Victoria's Golden Jubilee. In 1895, X-rays discovered. In 1896, wireless telegraphy invented. In 1897, Victoria's Diamond Jubilee. In 1901, there was a death of Queen Victoria and Edward VII succeeded to the throne. So now let's come to the modern and contemporary period. So let's start with it. In 1902, there was the Anglo-Japanese Treaty. In 1903, first airplane flight. In 1910, Edward VII dies and George V ascends the throne. In 1914 to 1918, First World War begins. In 1917, Russian Revolution happened. In 1918, Franchise Act granting the vote to women over 30. In 1919, Lady Esther elected as first woman MP. In 1920, League of Nations established. In 1922, fascism takes place in Italy. In 1930, World Economic Depression. In 1931, fall of Labour government. National government formed. In 1933, Hitler becomes Chancellor of Germany. In 1936, death of George V. Accession of Edward VIII, abdication crisis, and accession of George VI. In 1939, Second World War begins. In 1945, war ends. Atom bombs dropped on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. UNO founded. In 1947, independence of India and Pakistan. In 1952, death of George VI. Elizabeth II ascends. In 1953, conquest of Everest. In 1961, Berlin Wall built. In 1962, National Theatre established. In 1968, Martin Luther assassinated. In 1969, capital punishment abolished. In 1970, age of majority reduced from 21 to 18. In 2002, Elizabeth's Diamond Jubilee. So that's it for today. If you like my video, please like, subscribe and share my channel. And thank you for listening and study literature.